Jean, 26 years old, was beautiful. Not only was she the widow of my husband's best friend, but she was also the girl he had secretly admired during school. Whenever the child fell sick, my husband was always at her beck and call. She spent my family's money, ate our food, and took my job. Then one day, I overheard my husband saying through the window. Jean let out a low sigh. Can I lie next to you for a while? So she wanted to sleep with my man too. When I saw my husband buying Jean some polyester fabric at the supply and marketing cooperative. He also bought some egg cakes and peach crisps. I immediately confronted him. And we had a big fight. He refused to admit anything and even turned the blame on me. He called me a shrew, accusing me of spreading baseless rumors without any evidence. He started giving me the cold shoulder. He had calculated it well. By the fourth day, I gave in. I apologized to him. But soon after, rumors about him and Jean started circulating in the courtyard. Sean came in and slapped me. It was the first time he had ever hit me. He said, Nina, you're too vicious. Spreading rumors like this, how can Jean, an orphan and widow, survive? Now she doesn't even dare to leave the house. Isn't this cutting off her livelihood? I denied it. I didn't. Who else could it be if not you? Do you think Jean would spread rumors about herself? You're doing this but can't face the consequences. How could I admit to something I hadn't done? He moved into the dormitory. A week later, my mother-in-law fell ill. He asked me to go take care of her. I didn't want to go, but since we were from the same village, if I didn't check on her, my parents would hear about it. So, I took time off from work. But when I returned, Jean had taken over my job. While I was away, my husband, under the guise of his authority, transferred my work to Jean without my consent. He even told others that it was because of the rumors I spread that Jean was hurt, and this was a compensation for the damage I caused her. When I heard this, it was like a thunderclap. I wasn't stupid. I could smell a conspiracy. I suspected that Jean had started the rumors herself to take my job. After her husband's death, she had replaced him as a temporary worker at the lime kiln. The job was not only tiring but also particularly dirty. Now, she had not only stolen my job but also falsely accused me of spreading rumors. I cried for 3 days at home, growing more and more furious. Sean came to bring me foot soap water every day, coaxing me to eat. One day, he gave me 2 big white rabbit candy pieces. The night before, I had seen nearly half a pound of them on the table. Now there were only 2 left. It was clear who they had been given to. I spat the candy into the trash. Sean lost his patience. Mina, don't be so unforgiving. If it weren't for your rumors, Jean wouldn't have been afraid to go to work, and I wouldn't have had to give your job to her as compensation. His words made my chest feel like it was stuffed with cotton. I'll say it again. I didn't spread the rumors. What right do you have to give my job to someone else? She took my job and still dares to work? Sean immediately put on a calm expression. Fine. Fine, cutting so by a sigh. It wasn't you. But the job has already been given away. And it's no use being angry now. You're my wife. Don't worry. Even without a job, I can support you. Now that Jean has a proper job, I won't interfere with her. Look, you've lost weight. I made some chicken soup for you. At that moment, I heard the door open. And Jean's voice came in. Sean. Amber is crying and says he misses you. Sean smiled and went out. This kid. He misses his godfather after just 1 day? I immediately followed him out. Why does she have our house keys? Jean hurriedly explained. Nina. Don't misunderstand. When you went back to your hometown a few days ago, I helped Sean with some cooking. Here's the key back to you. She placed the key on the counter. Jean was wearing the polyester dress she bought at the cooperative, black leather shoes, and her hair was styled in a braid. No one could imagine this was the poor widow Sean had spoken of. She was holding her son Amber by the hand. With a provocative smile, she said, Mina, how are you feeling? I heard you were sick. I bought you a can of food. Sean took the can from her and greeted them to eat. You all really have good luck. I just finished stewing chicken. And now you're here. Come, Nidinful solve my session. Let's eat together. There were exactly 4 bowls of rice. Clearly one for Jean and her son. My heart felt like it was burning. The flames growing hotter. At the dinner table, Sean gave 2 chicken legs, one to Amber and one to Jean. Jean quickly tried to put the chicken leg in my bowl. Maybe you should have it. Nina. Sean pressed her wrist down. No need. She's been having a poor appetite these days and can't handle greasy food. Jean awkwardly smiled. Well then. Nina. I actually have something I need your help with. I lowered my head and said nothing. Sean immediately said. Go ahead and say it. My wife will help if she can. Jean took out a stack of forms. I've never done any statistics work before. Nina. Can you help me with that and maybe teach me how? I was a statistician at the cotton mill. Jean had barely finished elementary school. So how could she do this work? Sean quickly took the forms from her. It's fine. Nina has nothing to do at home anyway. If you ever have work you can't do, just bring it to her. Or if she's bored, she can help you out occasionally. No problem. He was trying to get me to work while she took the paycheck for free. My anger reached its peak. 3. I flipped the table over. The soup bowl hit Amber on the forehead. Amber sat on the floor, crying. I grabbed Jean's hair and slapped her across the face. Suddenly, hattingly, I was kicked away and slammed hard against the wall. I crumpled to the floor. My breath stopped instantly. I felt liquid flowing between my legs. Sean didn't even glance at me. He just grabbed Amber and ran out. I felt the sticky fluid growing thicker. My lips lost all color. The sweet memories of the past flashed through my mind like poison. He had treated me so well before, never letting me suffer. My grandmother had favored boys over girls. When she was alive, I could barely get enough food at home. He often secretly saved some of his food to share with me. After my grandmother passed away, we split the family property with my uncle. And our lives got better. My parents never let me drop out of school. And I finished high school just like my brother. I earned my job as a statistician by my own abilities. I don't know how much time passed, but when I opened my eyes again, I was in the hospital, staring at a white ceiling. Sean was looking at me with a worried expression. When he saw me wake up, he was overjoyed. He hurried to call the doctor. The doctor arrived and immediately started giving me instructions. The child couldn't be saved. But don't worry. You're still young. Take good care of yourself. Rest well during your confinement. And you'll have children in the future. Sean tried to interrupt the doctor. My blood ran cold. What? You said I was pregnant? The doctor looked at me helplessly. You're 2 months pregnant. You didn't know? I couldn't shake off the shock of my rebirth as the doctor's words hit me. I had no idea I was pregnant. In my previous life, I had been unconscious for 2 days before waking up, only to find that Sean had brought me home. He had concealed the fact that I had miscarried. I had no pregnancy symptoms either. And my periods were always irregular. Sometimes not showing up for 2 or 3 months. The doctor's words pierced me like a sharp ice pick, driving straight into my heart. Tears soaked my hair by my ears. Sean hurried over to console me. Nina. The doctor said we're still young. We'll have children in the future. I swear I'll never disappoint you again. There was pleading in his eyes. We'd been married for 3 years. Enduring countless herbal remedies and folk cures just to get pregnant. But Sean kicked it all away. Go better. Metallic taste rose in my throat, and I spat out one word. Leave. The doctor saw that something was wrong and said a few comforting words before leaving. Sean grabbed my hand, slapping his own face. I'm sorry. I really didn't mean to. Nina. Please forgive me. His eyes were desperate. We had been married for 3 years. And it was only after drinking countless potions that we had finally managed to conceive, and Sean kicked it all away. I looked at him with a hollow gaze. Leave. I didn't want to say a single word more. Sean tucked the blanket around me. I'll go cook for you. Please calm down first. He fled as though escaping. I gradually began to calm down, reflecting on my past life. After I was discharged from the hospital, I lost my job and had no choice but to stay at home. The people in the compound spread rumors that I had made up the story about losing my job, I became self-conscious and afraid to leave the house. Sean forced me to stay at home and make statistics for Jean in exchange for living expenses. He even found an old accountant to teach Jean. Years of suppression led to 2 miscarriages. The doctor said it was because of my emotional state. He told me to adjust my mindset. But how could I? Sean's relationship with Jean grew more and more ambiguous. How could I adjust my mindset? He told me to go back to my hometown for a break. But in reality, he just wanted to send me back to take care of his mother. Because I had no children. My mother-in-law resented me. I spent decades in the countryside alone. Until Amber got married. And Sean retired. He bought a house for Amber. He and Jean lived in the city while I remained alone in the countryside. My mother-in-law accidentally let it slip that Jean was the one Sean had secretly admired when they were in school. He ignored me completely. When I was ill, my nephew was the one who took care of me. When the village posted a demolition notice, Sean finally returned, bringing a radiant Jean with him. My face was etched with deep lines. A stark contrast to Jean's flawlessly maintained face. He had come to claim the compensation for the demolition. He said, "We've never had children. So why not give all the money to Amber? At least there'll be someone to take care of us in our old age." I spat out a mouthful of blood. I ended my bitter and just life then. Luckily, having fulfilled my ancestration, the heavens gave me a chance to be reborn. I wiped away the tears from my eyes and took a deep breath of fresh air. As though it would open up the tightness in my chest. I would divorce him. I couldn't spend another life with someone like that. First, I needed to recover my health. In my past life, I hadn't known I had miscarried and didn't pay much attention. So, the frequent miscarriages in the later years were closely related to this. And I couldn't let them live easily. I would make them pay. In the evening, Sean came with a lunchbox containing millet porridge, brown sugar, and a boiled egg. He wanted to feed me, but I swatted his hand away. I silently picked up the lunchbox and ate. I had been in the hospital for 7 days. And every day Sean came up with new ways to cook for me. The patient in the bed next to mine said I had found a thoughtful, good man. I didn't say anything. They commented that I always kept a straight face and called me ungrateful. I really wanted to ask them if they would want such a man. Sean always had that pampered look. And it disgusted me. Sean took me back home. As soon as we entered the house, he guiltily hugged me. "Nina, please don't be angry. Okay?" I didn't think it through. It was just a reflex. It was mainly because Amber's forehead was bleeding. And you were still holding on to Jean. I just got carried away. I smiled sarcastically. In fact, Sean was a bit panicked. If Nina had started yelling, he wouldn't have been afraid. He and Nina grew up together. And Nina had always been the kind of fiery person who would explode and then get over it. But when she suddenly became quiet, Sean felt uneasy. He thought to himself, tomorrow's expenses would come up. He should buy Nina some fabric to appease her. The last time, Nina got upset when he bought fabric for Jean. The next day, Sean led to the supply and marketing cooperative. Bought peach crisps, cakes, and a piece of floral fabric. He also bought a can of malted milk for Nina. When he entered the house, he saw that Jean was actually cooking in his kitchen. Nina's door was tightly closed. Sean walked to the kitchen and whispered, "Why are you here? Didn't I tell you not to come for now?" Jean's eyes were red. "It's my fault. I just wanted to make it up to you. I'll finish cooking and leave. I won't disturb you." Sean sighed. Then Jean said, feeling aggrieved, "I might have to go back to my hometown." Sean asked in confusion, "Why? You just found a job. Why go back?" I. Jean hesitated. "I can't do the statistics. Our team leader scolds me every day, saying that if I can't finish by the end of the month, she'll tell the factory director to fire me." "What? How can it be so serious? Are there no other positions?" "Well, you can switch to another position." Jean wiped away her tears. "There's only one position for a statistician." Sob. Sean was frustrated and rubbed his hair. "Go back. I'll cook. Let me think of a way." Jean took off her apron and was about to leave when she saw the items on the table. "Sean, Is this the malted milk you bought for Amber? He's been asking for it for days. You're really good to him. If Bang were here, he'd be glad to know. Sean couldn't get the words out. Take it back. Amber got scared the other day. Give it to him to calm him down. Jean reached for the piece of fabric. Sean, can you spare me this fabric? I want to give it to my team leader. Maybe she'll give me a new position. Sean hesitated. Eventually. Jean took the fabric. Sean also packed a peach crisps and some cake for the child. Just as he saw Jean off, he turned and saw me standing at the door. Sean froze for a moment. Then quickly composed himself. Don't get the wrong idea. Bang was my brother. Before he passed, he asked me to take care of his wife and child. I promised him I would look after them well. Amber got fright and a few days ago. That's all. But don't worry. Once I've helped her settle down at the factory, I'll stop concerning myself with them. It had been a year since Bang's death, and ever since, Sean had been looking after Jean and her son. My resistance, my anger, my questions, all of it was dismissed as unreasonable tantrums. Once, I would have argued, would have cried, but now, after living through one lifetime already, the fervent hope to live peacefully with him had long since burned out, leaving behind only cold ashes. I thought of my unborn child, of those nights he never came home, leaving me alone to tend to my own wounds, of my past life's misery and helplessness. I couldn't hold it back anymore. I finally said the word I'd never dared to say before. She's your responsibility. Let's get divorced. From now on, whoever you spend your wages on, however you help them, it's none of my concern. Sean's face froze. What? What did you just say? I repeated every word, slowly and clearly. He hadn't expected me to mention divorce. In this era, divorce was almost unheard of. A divorced woman would be ostracized, treated even worse than a widow. He thought I was just angry, that I couldn't possibly leave him. After all, he had a clear conscience, and his relationship with Jean was innocent. So, reassured, he let out a deep sigh and softened his tone. He held out a pack of peach pastries. I know you like these. I bought them just for you. Don't be so petty. It's hard for a woman raising a child on her own. I looked at him coldly and asked. Hard? She's living off most of your wages. Hard? She's always wearing new clothes, eating meat every meal, while you're at the hospital with her. I'm alone at home, while you take her to the state-run restaurant. I'm chewing on dry buns. You slandered me, stole my job, and left me to face people's gossip. Sean, don't you think I'm more like the widow here? Sometimes, I wish it were me whose husband had died. He ruined my life and still dared to act so self-righteous. I looked at the two open pastries in his hand and took them calmly. Sean relaxed, thinking I'd finally calmed down. This girl had always known how to coax me. A few sweets and I'd stop crying. But the next moment, I hurled the pastries straight out the window. Da Huang. Here. I called to the dog outside. Sean froze. He knew how I valued food, how, growing up hungry, I never wasted even a single crumb. Watching me throw it away left a hollow ache in his chest. Before he could react, I tossed the two cakes after them, then turned and walked inside, leaving him standing there, utterly dazed. The next morning, I went into town. In my previous life, I remembered seeing a recruitment notice outside the Education Bureau. I didn't know if it was still there, but I had to check. Sure enough, I found it. A middle school was hiring teachers. There were still 2 weeks left before the exam. I hadn't missed it. It was 1975. I needed to find a job first to support myself until the college entrance exams were restored at the end of 1977. This time, I wouldn't let the opportunity slip away. I bought eggs and milk powder from the supply shop, and went to visit my high school teacher. He gave me some textbooks and study materials for the exam. After returning home, I locked myself in the room every day to study. Sean tried several times to talk to me, but I turned him away each time. One day, when I wasn't in the room, he went in to see what I'd been busy with. He found a book, An Introduction to Primary and Secondary Mathematics, and quietly tucked it into his coat before leaving. When I came back from the restroom, I couldn't find the book anywhere. Panic rose in me. It was my teacher's copy. Then I saw two steamed buns on the table. Had Sean come home? I went straight to Jean's place. Sure enough, he was there. Sean. Where's my book? He grinned, trying to change the subject. I bought you 2 big buns. All meat filling. They're on the table. Where's my book? He scratched his head. Jean's really bad at math. I saw that introduction book of yours, it's great. Thought I'd borrow it for a while. I actually laughed, anger sharp as a blade. It was just after work hours. I raised my voice. Sean, did your family teach you that you can borrow things without asking? Taking without permission is called stealing. People passing by started to look over. I knew if I asked quietly, he'd just laugh it off and refuse. So since he had no shame, I'd strip him of it entirely. Everyone, come and see. My husband stealing from his wife to give things to a widow. He tried to pull me inside, but I dodged him and shouted louder. The crowd thickened. He lowered his voice. I'll return it in half a month. I promise. Good as new. Just then, a paper airplane flew over. It was a page from my book. My heart clenched. I shoved Sean aside and ran toward it. Jean's son, Amber, was tearing my book apart. I lunged to grab it back, but Jean blocked me. Nina. I'm sorry. He's just a child. Another page tore. I pushed her away and snatched the book back. Amber burst into tears. Jean staggered and fell dramatically to the ground. Sean rushed to shield them. Nina. The kid didn't mean it. I'll glue it back, okay? Why'd you push Jean? Sean, Kaiden fulftel went for Sean. You stole my book while I wasn't home. You said you'd return it intact. This is your idea of intact? He grit his teeth. It's just a stupid book. Why do you always have to be so unreasonable? My hands trembled with rage. If you could have gotten it yourself, you wouldn't have had to steal mine. That book belongs to my teacher. How am I supposed to return it now? The crowd began murmuring. Most siding with me. Few people were educated, but everyone knew books were precious and hard to buy. Finally, having fulfilled right sigh, Sean snapped, shouting, Enough. Fine. I'll pay you for it. I turned to the crowd and declared, You all heard that, right? Please be my witnesses. You need to go to the teacher's house and apologize. I don't want the teacher to think that I don't take care of my books. I said. I don't want it fixed. I want him to get me an identical one right now. I snapped at Sean with fury in my voice. Tomorrow. If you can't bring it back, I'll go to your factory and find the factory director. I'll tell the director that my husband spends every day in a widow's house, stealing my things to give to her. Sean slammed the door and left. I knelt on the floor, picking up the torn pages of the book. One of the aunts couldn't stand it anymore. How shameless. Don't call her Jean anymore, just call her a broken shoe. The insults rang out around me. Jean hid in the house like a frightened quail. I thanked the aunts and returned home alone. After Sean stormed out, he first went to the mechanical factory to ask his colleagues. His colleague said, Math book? I only have elementary arithmetic books at home. No general books like that. He then rode his bike to the bookstore in the city outskirts. But the clerk didn't even look up. We haven't had books like that in stock for a long time. You'll have to go to the Education Bureau's retail department. And you'll need a teacher's certificate to buy them. He went to an old high school classmate now working as a clerk in the neighborhood, but the classmate waved his hand. Do you think this is a regular book? It's for teachers. How could I get it for you? After a whole day of running around, Sean didn't even see a glimpse of the book. It only then dawned on him that this book wasn't something easily replaced. He decided to go home and act as if nothing had happened, not even mentioning the search for the book. The next day hadn't fulfilled my obsession. When I asked him about it, he vaguely responded, Wait a bit. I'm still looking. His face clearly displayed the word, dismissive. I didn't have time to argue with him now. Half a month later, I packed his steamed buns, grabbed my tea mug, and prepared all my exam materials. I went to the examination hall alone. I spent the whole day taking the exam. The results were announced a week later, and whether I could be admitted would depend on the Education Bureau's notice. Once the exam was over, I began preparing for the divorce. We had been married for 3 years. He worked as a technician at the mechanical factory, earning 86 yuan a month. I worked as a statistician at the cotton spinning factory, earning 67 yuan a month. I had grown up in hardship, so I was frugal. Before Jean entered our lives, we could save at least 100 yuan a month. With the wedding gift money, I had 3.0 yuan in savings. The divorce money would definitely be split evenly. The house was provided by his workplace, so it had nothing to do with me. If I passed the exam, I would fight for a house. If not, I could rent a room temporarily. When I got home, I pried open the loose brick on the bed. I took out the bis d'honneur. Opening the handkerchief that wrapped the money, I was shocked to find rolled up newspapers inside. My mind exploded. Where was my money? How had my money turned into newspapers? I lost my mind, grabbing a wooden stick and desperately searching the bed frame. Then, whatever was I? It hit me this was a bait and switch. The money must have been secretly given by Sean to Jean and her son. Now, I hated Sean to the core, wishing I could tear him apart. I forced myself to calm down. I needed evidence first. Just then, Sean returned. I threw the biscuit tin at his feet. Where is my money? Sean froze for a moment. Then panic set in. Nina, listen to me. Amber is always sick, and Jean borrowed the money to take him to the doctor. Where's the IOU? Sean avoided my gaze. I didn't write one. I said calmly. Either Jean comes and writes the IOU, or we go straight to divorce now. Sean looked conflicted. Nina, I know lending the money was wrong, but I felt sorry for Jean. Amber is a premature baby. Always sick. I couldn't just stand by. I didn't say no to lending the money, but at least there should be an IOU. Right? You took the money. You should at least give me an IOU for peace of mind. Right? Sean still seemed undecided. Sean. Even brothers need to settle accounts clearly. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Sean. Amber has a fever. Please help me take him to the hospital. Sean opened the door, and I saw Jean's anxious face. Her makeup was immaculate, and her hair was neatly styled clearly. She had dressed up carefully. Sean quickly put on his shoes and ran out with her. That night, Sean didn't come home. The next morning, Sean returned with dark circles under his eyes. He sat at the dinner table, waiting for me to serve his food. I ignored him. When he entered the kitchen, he realized I hadn't made his meal at all. After I finished my meal, I grabbed the marriage certificate and household register. Let's go. Time for the divorce. Sean didn't expect me to be serious. He grabbed my hand. The money? Jean can definitely pay it back. He has a job now. Paying it back won't be a problem. I recoiled in disgust and jerked my hand away. Either write an IOU, or we divorce. Just then, Jean appeared at the door again. Truly like a lingering ghost. Perfect timing. I opened the door and yelled outside. Jean took my money and hasn't returned it. And she's seducing. I was silenced by Sean's hand over my mouth. I bit him hard. Jean screamed and tried to pull me away, but I let go and slapped her hard across the face. I put all my strength into that slap. Jean staggered back. Sean didn't dare to move. He shielded Jean behind him. Nina, are you sick? Can you act normal? How long are you going to keep this up? Is this money Jean borrowed from me? If you don't admit it, I'll report it to the police. Either write the IOU, or I'll report you and divorce you. Your choice. Jean looked at Sean with a pitiful expression, hiding behind him. Jean let out a low sigh. In order to lead Sean a good impression, finally came out. Nina, you misunderstood. I'll write the IOU. I don't want to cause conflict between you two. I took out a pen and paper and said, write it. Jean let out a low sigh. In her crooked handwriting, wrote me an IOU for 3.0 yuan. I grabbed her hand and rubbed the blood from where I had bitten Sean onto the paper and pressed her hand down on it. I carefully folded the IOU and said to them. My job was earned through my own ability. Without my signature. Should she still be temporarily filling in for me? Both of their faces changed. Why hadn't I thought of this in my previous life? Even though many things in this era weren't very strict, it was impossible for them to transfer a job without my knowledge. In my previous life, they probably forged my signature. I'll give you 3 days. Get me 2,000 yuan for the job money. Or I'll report you. Jean ran off crying, leaving the child behind. Sean hurriedly took the child and chased after her. I rummaged through the drawer to find the family ration tickets and packed up the last few eggs we had. Then, let out a low sigh. I went to the supply store and bought a can of wheat milk powder, some milk candies, and a cake. I went over to my brother's house. My nephew had been very kind to me in my previous life. The poor child. His mother died from complications during childbirth and had never known a mother's love. My brother, a man juggling both work and child care, couldn't attend to everything. But he didn't send his son back to the countryside to be looked after by our parents. He wanted the boy to have the opportunity to study in the city. In my past life, I had been too caught up in my own entanglements of love and hate to pay much attention to him. But this time, I would make sure to make up for it. When my nephew saw me, he was overjoyed, calling out, "Aunt," and cuddling up in my arms. My brother was at home too. I spoke honestly about my desire to divorce. My brother didn't object. He just clenched his fists tightly. I held my brother's hand. In my previous life, I had kept everything hidden. That was why my brother had gotten into a fight with Sean when he saw them together on the street. My brother was even reprimanded for it. I told him not to be impulsive. I would get what I deserved before I divorced. And I would ruin their reputations. I left the promissory note with my brother. That night, I knew I had made the right decision. At midnight, Sean began rummaging through my clothes. Sean had promised Jean that the money was a gift. No strings attached, because a few days ago, I had been angry with him. And he went to complain to Jean. He got drunk and ended up having sex with her. He felt guilty, but he thought he could make it up to me for the rest of his life. Jean, let out a low sigh, on the other hand, was a widow, and he had taken advantage of her. As a man, he should take responsibility. If he couldn't give her a marriage, at least he could offer her some money as compensation. But just 3 days after giving Jean the money, I found out. I even forced Jean to sign a promissory note. Now, he wanted to take the note back and destroy it. He thought if the note was gone, I wouldn't be able to claim the money anymore. After all, who could I blame if the note was lost? He thought that from now on, he would only care for Jean and her son, and never act impulsively like that again. He would also make sure to treat me better and make it up to me. But no matter what, he couldn't find the promissory note Jean had signed. In his panic, he looked up and saw my eyes fixed on him. Sean jumped, startled, and fell off the bed. It wasn't a light fall. He broke his arm. I watched him groan in pain on the floor, but didn't bother to help. I wrapped myself in a blanket and went into another room. Sean managed to get up and, bearing the pain, went to the hospital. When he saw the look in my eyes, his heart filled with fear. Did Nina know about his affair with Jean? It couldn't be. But Nina's eyes no longer held any affection for him. It was as though she was looking at a stranger. Sean went to work with his arm in a cast. For the next few days, I showed no interest in him when he came home. I didn't cook for him. He started eating at Jean's house. He was afraid. On the 3rd day, I finally spoke up. It's the 3rd day. Give me the money for the work. Sean stuttered. Nina, Adenja. Where do you expect Jean to find 2,000 yuan? Can't you just stop arguing? I'll give you my wages from now on. Is that okay? Every word I said to him now felt like torture. Just tell me. Will you give me the money or not? He put on that indulgent face again. All right. All right. I'll give it to you. I'll give you a few billion. Then we'll have a baby. His flirtatious, lewd jokes from the past life suddenly made me gag. I knew they weren't going to give me the money. So, I went to the cotton mill's office and found the director. I knew the director had been trying to get her daughter into the mill, But there was no need for more workers right now. Her daughter had only finished high school and had polio, so she couldn't do many jobs. My work as a statistician was perfect for her. When I told the director I wanted to sell my position, Chrysanthos nearly jumped out of her seat in excitement. If her daughter could get a formal job, it would be easier for her to find a husband in the future. I explained the whole situation between Jean and me. Chrysanthos decided to buy my job. She told me to clarify that my position had been replaced and to go with her to the factory manager to handle the paperwork. I received 1,800 yuan. In truth, my job could have sold for 2,000 yuan. But selling it to the director meant no trouble. I knew that after the reforms, layoffs would be inevitable, and the cotton mill would eventually shut down. That the compensation for disabled workers would far exceed the current price of a job. There would be pensions for the elderly, and appropriate street jobs arranged for them. The paperwork was done quickly. Chrysanthos went to pick up the money. I took it and went straight to my brother's house. I asked him to keep it safe. I didn't tell Jean that the job she'd been dreaming of was no longer available. After all, she hadn't told me when she got the job. But she had taken a few days off recently because Sean had found an old accountant to teach her how to do statistical reports. I made myself a bowl of noodles. Sat down to eat while reading. Tomorrow, I would know my exam results. I wondered how I'd done. Sean had been eating at Jean's house since his injury. I looked out the window and saw Jean walking Sean home. I thought to myself, it's a good thing we're in the age of technology. Or I could have caught these two on video and nailed them to the pillar of shame. Then I remembered there are cameras now. I needed to find a way to borrow one. Otherwise, hadn't I failed wire-wise? I didn't know how long this divorce would drag on. If he found out I had a job now, he'd never let go. I made up my mind. I went to the photo shop to rent a camera, but they refused. Naturally, cameras were expensive. And if I were them, I wouldn't rent one either. I went to my brother to see if he could help me borrow one. At the same time, my exam results came in. I did well, second place. I waited for the Education Bureau to announce the notice. My brother had a very good friend. He was now a reporter at a newspaper. He lent my brother an old camera that had been discarded at home. After my brother got off work, he would keep a regular watch near my house. I, too, started observing Sean's movements. A week later, Sean once again asked me to do that with him. And when I refused, he became very irritable. Was it frustration? A man in his prime, having gone over a month without touching me. He was restless and couldn't bear it. When I refused his repeated requests, he slammed the door and left. I quickly went to find my brother, who was about to leave. Together, we went to Jean's house and stood under her window. We could hear their voices inside. At first, they were both restrained. After Jean had lulled the child to sleep, Sean no longer beat around the bush. Jean, can I lie next to you for a while? There was no response from Jean. So she must have nodded. After a while, Sean spoke again. Jean, can I lie on top of you? Still no response from Jean. After another moment, there were heavy, labored breaths. My face turned red as I listened. Jean let out a low sigh. I don't. I only. Then, let out a low sigh. I heard the rustling sound of clothes being removed. I felt it was enough. I took out a wire and, sliding it through the door crack, unlocked it. As soon as I entered, I turned on the flashlight. And the two of them froze. Unable to separate in time. The sound of the camera shutter snapping brought Sean back to reality. I wondered if this scare would make Sean less capable in the future. In a panic, Sean quickly put on his clothes, while Jean hid under the blanket, not daring to come out. I went up to Sean and slapped him twice. I had specifically told my brother not to get involved, but I could still hear him clenching his fists. Sean followed me home. I locked the door to my room and went to bed. Sean sat outside the whole night. The next day, as soon as I stepped outside, he knelt before me. Nina, I was wrong. I acted impulsively. I really didn't mean to. Please forgive me. We've known each other since childhood. You know I like you. I swear, I'll never contact Jean again. He kept slapping himself. This bond of growing up together last life. It wore me down to death. I took out the household registration book and marriage certificate. Give me back my money. Then we can divorce. You're like a used dish. I feel sick just looking at you. How could I possibly eat from it? Sean cried, shaking his head. You can't blame me for everything. I'm at that age. And you wouldn't let me touch you. I couldn't control myself. It's not all my fault. This was the man who made me waste my whole life. Shameless and irresponsible. Why was I so blind in my past life? I don't agree to divorce. He yelled at me. He didn't go to work and wouldn't let me leave the house. This continued until noon when my in-laws arrived. It turned out he had brought in reinforcements. But Sean didn't mention the reason I wanted a divorce. As soon as my mother-in-law entered, she started scolding me. You heartless thing. If it weren't for my son giving you food when you were a child, you'd have starved to death by now. Now you have a job. And you want a divorce? You filthy, heading filfil. Broken down woman who can't even bear children. And you still want to leave? Mom, stop. Sean interrupted, pulling her away. I remembered those years in my past life when she criticized me constantly and never stopped her endless insults. Without a word, I slapped her twice. She was stunned. First of all, I was pregnant because your son kicked me when I was carrying his child for another woman. Secondly, your son was having an affair with a widow, and I caught him in bed with her. He even forced me to give my job to that widow. Do you understand now? He wants to form alliances. I'm not playing along. And now I'm divorcing him. I looked at Sean and, recalling our childhood bond, I had kept quiet about his affair. But if you don't give me the money and go with me to divorce, I promise I'll ruin your reputation and make you lose your job. My mother-in-law was stunned. She turned to Sean. Is she telling the truth? Sean knelt again. Nina, just give me one more chance. I'll work like an ox for you for the rest of my life. I don't need a randy stallion. My mother-in-law understood. She immediately started beating Sean. You scoundrel. How could you do something like this? My father-in-law, who had been silently sitting on the floor, now picked up a smoking pipe and started hitting him. I just sat quietly and watched the family's performance. While my mother-in-law beat him, she kept glancing at me. When she saw I wasn't reacting, she eventually got tired and stopped, tears streaming down her face. She grabbed my hand. Child. I know it's all Sean's fault, but whim and don't have it easy after a divorce. I promise. If he's still involved with that widow, I'll break his legs. My father-in-law tapped his pipe on the floor. Nina, your parents are from the countryside. If people find out you've divorced, they'll talk behind their backs. Is this a threat? Father-in-law, I don't care what people say about my parents. But if your son is convicted of being a thug and gets executed, your younger son's job will probably be gone too. So, I suggest you think carefully about what you say when you get home. My father-in-law looked at me with disbelief. He couldn't believe that I, who had always been weak, could say such words. At that moment, my brother arrived, followed by two other people. Without any small talk, my brother said, Sean, my sister wants a divorce. Can't you understand? Seeing the situation, Sean knew divorce was inevitable. He stopped resisting and went with me to handle the divorce procedures. He borrowed money from the factory and gave me bar yuan. He said that since the family money should be divided equally, the remaining 500 yuan was compensation for me. He was dreaming if he thought I would let him off that easily. You still haven't paid me for the book. Sean licked his dry lips and went to Jean's house. He came back with 200 yuan to pay for the book. Then he said, Nina, I'll wait for you to come back. Disgusting. As we packed our things, we overheard my mother-in-law quietly mumbling to Sean. Now that the divorce is happening, I wonder if Nina's family can still help us collect land. You have a wife with a job, yet you go after a widow. Are you crazy? My brother, with the help of others, moved my things into his house. I temporarily stayed at my brother's place. With only 2 days before the notice came out, I would wait for the result before making any further arrangements. Jean went to work. She didn't even get into the factory. Sean took Jean to the factory director. The director looked at him with disdain, making him feel as though there were thorns in his back. Sean, you and Nina have already divorced, right? You're not still hoping for her job, are you? Sean hurriedly explained. No, director. We were hired before the divorce. The director didn't want to waste time on him. Nina already sold her job. You have no right to replace her. In the end, both Sean and Jean were kicked out. Jean couldn't even return as a temporary worker. Sean was filled with guilt towards Jean. Just stay home and take care of the child. I'll support you both. Jean stayed at home, taking care of the child. With a sense of peace. Sean wanted to talk to me about work, but he didn't dare go to my brother's house. The Education Bureau's announcement was out. This era was still quite fair. I officially became a Chinese teacher at the first high school. The school temporarily assigned me a dorm room, though I wouldn't be eligible for a housing allocation until next year. The school wasn't far from my brother's house, so I mostly stayed there, occasionally going to the dorm. My nephew would start first grade next year, and I planned to teach him some first grade lessons. My brother gave me the film and asked me to keep it safe, so they couldn't turn it against me. After being reborn, I had finally broken free from Sean's family's grip. I had a good job. I never expected that. Even though I didn't seek trouble with them, they would still dare to come after me. The principal called me into his office and said with some regret, Nina, someone has reported your improper lifestyle, claiming it led to your divorce and makes you unsuitable for a teaching position. My pupils contracted. I knew exactly who it was. I then explained the whole situation to the principal and assured him I could clear things up, hoping the school would give me a chance. The principal, a woman, showed empathy as a fellow woman. She gave me 3 days to address the issue. I went to the hospital and got an abortion certificate, which clearly stated that the miscarriage was due to a heavy blow. I returned home, took the film to the photo studio, and developed the pictures. I had 20 photos developed, cutting out the private parts with a knife. Since they didn't want to let me live peacefully, I would drag them down with me. I wrote up the details of the incident and made 20 copies. During off hours, I took the photos and the detailed account and posted them on the bulletin board in the compound. I then put up the flyers along the way to the factory gates. I even posted my hospital records showing the miscarriage. When Sean walked out, he saw the flyers I had posted. He was stunned, tearing them down as he ran. He was afraid the police would charge him with a crime for being a pervert. The next morning, he and Jean went to get their marriage certificate. But as soon as Sean entered the factory, the manager called him in. The matter had caused too much of a stir. The factory asked him to go home and wait for an investigation. Sean sneaked to Jean's house, planning to have her return to her hometown for a few days to hide. But to his surprise, the place was surrounded by people. The door was smeared with animal dung, and the stench could be smelled from a distance. He quickly ran to the backyard and climbed through the window. In the end, they left for her hometown that night. A week later, Sean's penalty was announced. The factory required him to repay the money he had borrowed and dismissed him. When Sean received the notice, he was completely stunned. In the end, Jean took the money he had given her. Furious, he brought his parents to my family's house. I had a feeling he would come looking for trouble after receiving his penalty. So my brother and I both returned to our hometown. Sean and his parents came and demanded an explanation for why I was so unforgiving. Sean, did you ever consider the consequences when you reported me? Sean's mother jumped up in anger. You're talking nonsense. How could we report you? I coldly replied. Then ask your dear daughter-in-law if she and the school reported my improper lifestyle that led to my divorce. I worked hard to earn this job. And now you want to falsely accuse me? I will clear my name with the facts. I originally intended to let you go because you helped me in the past, but now you won't let me live in peace. And by the way, you'd better mind yourselves. This is Nina's family village. You outsiders want to trample over us? Sean's veins bulged in his neck. He turned and went home. After beating Jean, she finally admitted it was her who had reported me. Yeah, I reported you. I passed by the education bureau and saw the list of new hires. I just wanted to make sure you didn't get the job. My job was taken away. So why should you get such a good one? Why? Sean's mother rushed up. You little prostitute. You got my son fired. Just wait and see. I'll beat you to death. Jean wasn't an easy target either. The two women began fighting. Jean hadn't expected things to escalate like this. Sean went to the town, where no one knew him. He found a temporary job with a monthly salary of 26 yuan. In those days, without a recommendation letter, you couldn't get anywhere. Jean had to stay in the countryside. My salary now was 42.9 yuan. Not much more than a statistician. But I had more time to study. And my salary would increase every 2 months. A year and a half later, the national college entrance exam was restored. Both my brother and I participated. With the advantage of being reborn. My brother and I started reviewing a year in advance. 2 months later, we both received our admission letters. Both my brother and I were working while studying, with our employers covering the expenses. After graduation, we were expected to return to our original positions. I didn't have grand ambitions. I just wanted to spend this life with my family. I also received an apartment. The rural areas had also implemented the policy of dividing land among households. I rented out the family land and arranged for my parents to live in the city with my nephew. My apartment was also close to the school. Sean's father, lacking money, went to work in a black coal mine, where he died in a collapse last year. Sean took the compensation money and bought a small tube-shaped building in the city, living with Jean and her mother. With the reform and opening up, he wanted to do business, but without any capital. So, he planned to sell the house in his hometown. When I heard about it, I had my mother buy it. My mother was very reluctant. What's the point of buying a yellow mud house? I told her not to worry and to buy it immediately. In the end, my mother bought their house and the mountain land for 1,800 yuan. No one knew that, in the future, the government would collect land here. And these lands would eventually be worth over 8 million yuan. I saw Sean again 7 years later. Amber, who was in her 3rd year of junior high school, had gotten into a fight with a classmate and was called in by the school. Sean and Jean came to the school. Jean was holding a little girl's hand. The little girl looked small and thin. Her eyes barely open. Jaffer. These are Amber's parents. Sean's eyes were red. He just stared at me. Blankly. I carried on professionally. Amber's parents. Amber often gets into fights with classmates. And she sometimes takes their belongings without permission. Please educate her when you go home. Sean hesitated several times. Sean didn't know how to walk out of the principal's office. He looked back at Jean and regretted his actions. Why did he let go of such an excellent wife and go after a loose woman? Sean had caught the tail end of the good times. But no matter what business he tried, he ended up losing money. Perhaps his previous misdeeds were now catching up with him. In the end, he had to keep working manual labor jobs. In 2006, he came back to work on a construction site in his hometown. He found out that the house and land he had sold for 1,800 yuan had been compensated with over 8 million yuan. He vomited blood on the spot and fainted. When he woke up, he had suffered a stroke. At the hospital, they asked for a contact number for his family to pay for medical expenses. He gave them my name. I went to see him. Not out of sympathy, but because I wanted to see his pathetic state, hanging between life and death. It turned out that 5 years ago, Jean had said she was going to the big city to work, took all the family's money, and never came back. Amber had turned into a street thug, asking him for money. And if he didn't give it, she beat him up. Now, he had to take care of an elderly mother with dementia and a daughter with eye problems. He apologized to me, saying he knew he was wrong and hoped I could help him. I just wanted to see how miserable you've become. How could I help you? Seeing you suffer like this gives me peace of mind. I turned and left. A month later, I was watching TV at home when I saw a program on a crackdown on prostitution. In a hair washing parlor, 14 women were arrested for prostitution. I instantly recognized Jean. And that was the end. On the day of the college entrance exam, My husband, a sent-down youth, threatened me and my friend with a letter of introduction, preventing us from boarding the train. All because he was waiting for his first love, who had missed our meeting time due to shopping for new clothes. But in order to secure a spot to return to the city, we had to pass the college entrance exam. This was the only hope we, the sent-down youths, had. Afraid of missing the exam, I had no choice but to knock my husband unconscious and drag him onto the train. Later, my husband and I both successfully entered university and earned a return city quota. But his first love missed the exam because she didn't catch the train, and without a way to return to the city, she was forced to marry the village chief's youngest son. Half a year later, she was beaten to death in a domestic violence incident. My husband said it wasn't my fault. But on the day of our university graduation job assignments, he drugged me and took me to his first love's grave, where he cruelly killed me. As he shattered my skull with a brutal blow, I heard his vengeful curses. It's all because of your selfishness that Bellatrix missed the exam and couldn't return to the city. The suffering she endured, you should experience it too, and atone with your life. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn to the day when my husband insisted on waiting for his first love. If he was so determined to wait for her, then I would make sure they both missed the exam and lost their return city quota. Eloan, you need to talk some sense into Dorian. He's lost it. When I came out of the post office, my best friend, Leora, found me in a panic. Without waiting for me to respond, she dragged me to the train station plaza. Dorian stood there, a dark expression on his face, holding a stack of introduction letters, surrounded by the other sent-down youths. Today, if anyone dares to abandon Bellatrix, I'll make sure you all fail the exam, he declared. The sent-down youths were furious, but no one dared to snatch the letters from him. The introduction letters were too important. Without them, not only could they not take the exam in the provincial capital, they wouldn't even be allowed on the train. The smoke billowing from the train reminded everyone that it was about to depart. Leora paced anxiously in place. Eloan, go stop Dorian. If we miss this train, we'll all miss the exam. We, the sent-down youths, had been in the countryside for 3 years, constantly yearning to return to the city. So this exam was more important than anything else. Seeing that no one dared to act, Dorian smugly began lecturing everyone. You narrow-minded people don't deserve to take the exam. You should spend your entire life in the countryside and receive re-education from the poor peasants. The sent-down youths clenched their fists in anger. I pushed through the crowd and walked up to Dorian, snatching the letter from his hands. Coldly, I said, Bellatrix missed the meeting time because she was shopping for clothes. We shouldn't bear the consequences for her mistake. Dorian, realizing what had happened, tried to snatch the letter back, but the others held him down. He could only shout at me in rage. Eloan, I'm your husband. You won't help me, but you'll help these strangers? I ignored him and hurriedly led the group to buy train tickets. But we were too late. As the train's whistle echoed, it slowly pulled away from the station. Dorian started making cruel remarks from the side. Now, even if you don't want to wait, you'll have to wait with me. The sent-down youths glared at him with hatred, wishing they could beat him senseless. I couldn't help but sneer. What Dorian didn't know was that I had never intended to catch this train from the beginning. When Leora came to find me at the post office, I had already sent a telegram for help among the sent-down youths, except for Dorian and Bellatrix, who came from ordinary families. The rest of us were children of military families. As long as I sent a telegram, we could arrange for an armed transport plane to take us to the provincial capital. Recalling the scene from my previous life when Dorian smashed my skull at Bellatrix's grave, I tightened my grip on the introduction letter. This time, I would make him pay for his mistakes. I would make him see just how foolish he was. 10 minutes later, Bellatrix returned. She appeared in front of everyone, leisurely strolling in a fashionable floral dress. Dorian, I knew you'd never leave me behind. Bellatrix spun in front of Dorian, proudly displaying her new dress, while casting a triumphant glance at me. Dorian was about to speak with soft affection when the angry sent-down youths began shouting at him. Dorian, if you make me miss the exam, You'll regret it. And Bellatrix. What the hell is with buying a new dress? Are you planning to seduce someone? The furious expressions on the sent-down youths' faces made Bellatrix tremble. And she quickly hid behind Dorian. Dorian patted her shoulder reassuringly. Don't worry. No one can bully you as long as I'm here. Then, let out a low sigh. He turned to the others with a cold expression. If you want to get to the provincial capital before the exam, you'll have to kneel and apologize to Bellatrix right now. The sent-down youths were even angrier now. If I hadn't been desperately holding them back, there might have been a fight right there. We're going to the bus station to ask if there's a long-distance bus to the provincial capital, one of them muttered as they turned away angrily. Dorian, however, was full of confidence. I'll say it now, you'll all be begging me to help you. I gave him a surprised glance. And when I saw the envelope in his hand, I suddenly understood. 20 minutes later, everyone arrived at the bus station and inquired about the buses. But the staff told them the earliest bus wouldn't leave for the provincial capital until tomorrow afternoon, making it impossible to make it in time for the exam. The sent-down youths were immediately filled with despair. One of the female youths began crying on the spot. I want to go home. I miss my parents' cooking. I don't want to stay in this hellhole forever. Dorian and Bellatrix followed them. Never far behind. Dorian sneered. Want to take the exam? Either beg me, or walk to the provincial capital. It's only about 100 kilometers. His words made the entire bus station go silent. The sent-down youths surrounded him with emotional faces. Dorian wasn't worried, though. He pulled out the envelope and said, "Before you lay a hand on me, take a good look at what this is." Inside the envelope was a telegram reply, one that had been given to Dorian when we went to buy the tickets. The message was short and to the point. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. On transport plane to the provincial capital. Signed, Amancio. See? This is from a friend in the provincial capital. Tomorrow, we'll take an armed transport plane to the provincial capital for the exam. Dorian smirked, watching the sent-down youths' reactions. If you want to catch the exam, then kneel and beg me. To my surprise, the sent-down youths' expressions quickly shifted to something odd. Leora leaned closer to me and whispered, Eloan, didn't you tell Dorian who your father is? Amancio, that was my father's name. I shook my head. When we got married, I never told Dorian about the situation at home because I was afraid of hurting his pride. Once everyone knew a transport plane would be coming for the exam, they temporarily let Dorian off the hook and turned their attention to me. Heading to the guest house to rest, but Dorian, as if seeking praise, looked over at Bellatrix and said, Bellatrix, don't worry. As long as I'm here, I'll make sure you get into university and secure your spot back in the city. Seeing his smug expression, Leora couldn't help but ask, Eloan, are we really bringing these two troublemakers along? I smiled at my best friend. I deliberately had the telegram delivered into Dorian's hands. Leora blinked, taking a moment to process. You mean? Her eyes were full of excitement. I couldn't help but sneer. Doesn't he have a friend who can arrange for an armed transport plane? He probably wouldn't mind going without us. Right? Leora nodded, clearly relieved. If it weren't for Dorian and Bellatrix's recklessness, we'd already be on the train by now. They need to suffer a bit too, I said, a cold smile flickering at the corner of my mouth. I looked forward to the moment when Dorian and Bellatrix couldn't board the armed transport plane tomorrow. Will they still be able to smile then? Chapter 3. That night, as Leora and I were preparing to rest and recharge, a commotion came from the hallway. Bellatrix and Dorian were dancing disco in the hallway, shouting loudly as if they were possessed. The educated youth who had already been resting were all woken up, and everyone gathered in the corridor, glaring at the two of them. Eloan, look at this. What's going on? The youth had been holding their breath all day, and if it weren't for my face, they would have already gone over and beaten them up. I turned to Dorian and Bellatrix, only to see them holding large bags and small bundles in their hands. At that moment, my head buzzed, and I rushed back to my room to check, only to find that the grain coupons and money in my bag were missing. Dorian, did you take the grain coupons and money from my bag? All the expenses for the exams are in there. I asked him with red eyes. But his response was light and dismissive. Yeah. I took them. Bellatrix was hungry. So I took her to a state-owned restaurant for a meal, and bought some new clothes while I was at it. Hearing this, the youth were immediately furious. Leora shot Dorian a fierce glare and said, "Are you out of your mind? If she was hungry, couldn't she just eat some dry rations? Why drag her to a state-owned restaurant?" Dorian instantly became upset. What's wrong with going to a state-owned restaurant? She was scared by all of you today. And I had to comfort her properly. I stared at him in disbelief. These grain coupons were saved by the villagers through hard work. They're for us to focus on our exams. Not for you to use to please some woman. Last year, the village had a bad harvest, and the grain rations each of us received were insufficient. These grain coupons had been squeezed out by the villagers. Dorian lost his patience and grabbed my hair, snarling, "I already told you. I spent all the grain coupons and money. What are you going to do about it?" The pain on my scalp couldn't compare to the chill in my heart. I felt a sudden surge of laughter. To stay by his side, I had refused my family's repeated requests for me to return to the city. But this was the reward. He had resorted to violence because of Bellatrix. "I just hope you don't regret it tomorrow," I said through gritted teeth. The next morning. It wasn't until after 7 the next morning that Dorian and Bellatrix came downstairs. Hand in hand. Bellatrix walked up to me, pretending to be grateful, and said, "Eloan, the food at the state-owned restaurant was delicious. Thank you for treating me." I sneered inwardly. They had spent all the money and grain coupons last night, how could the meal not taste good? I wondered if they'd regret it when they had to walk over 100 kilometers to the provincial capital. Would they still be so sweet when they were starving during the exam? I led the youth to the county's armed forces division to wait for the transport plane. Bellatrix looked at Dorian with a wronged expression and asked, "Dorian, do you think Eloan is mad at me?" Dorian immediately pulled Bellatrix into his arms, comforting her with exaggerated tenderness. "Don't worry about her. It was just a little grain coupon and money. As long as it makes you happy, I'm willing to do anything. Dorian, you're so good to me. I'll definitely repay you in the future," she said, her voice full of affection. I glanced back from the doorway, wondering if they'd still be so sweet in a little while. 20 minutes later, a transport plane landed on the Armed Forces Division's tarmac. Two fully armed guards jumped out of the plane and immediately waved to me when they saw me. The transport plane had arrived. The youth eagerly climbed into the cabin, and Dorian and Bellatrix tried to board. But they were stopped. "Comrade, you can't board." Dorian froze. "Aren't you the ones who were called by my friends to pick me up?" "I'm Dorian." The guard looked at him with a tired expression. "Dorian? There's no one by that name in the military district. You're probably not waiting for this plane." "Eloan, are you really going to leave me behind? I'm your husband." Realization struck Dorian, and he turned pale as he looked at me. I feigned hesitation and glanced between the two of them. After all, this is an armed transport plane. I don't have the final say on this. But you're my husband and my best friend. I can't leave you here. Here's what I'll do, I'll talk to the guard, and one of you can come with me. "Which one?" "You can decide." I smiled faintly before continuing. "Actually, you guys could try your luck on the road. If a passing vehicle picks you up, you could still make it to the provincial capital today." The sent-down youths accompanying me instantly stifled their laughter. From yesterday until now, everyone had been quite infuriated by these two. Dorian's expression darkened, and he was about to angrily call for Bellatrix to leave with him. But Bellatrix, with an expectant look, turned to me. "Eloan, talk to the guard for me, and let me on the train. Dorian's been useless since coming to our village. He hasn't studied at all, so he can't pass the exam. It's pointless for him to go. My family has been hoping for me to get a return city quota. I can't miss this college entrance exam." Dorian gaped in disbelief, unable to process what he was hearing. Not long ago, Bellatrix had vowed to repay him. Yet here she was, belittling him as a useless failure. "Bellatrix, how could you say that about me?" Dorian wanted to argue with her. But Bellatrix somehow finding the strength, pushed him to the ground. Am I wrong? She spat. When I said I was hungry, you insisted on taking me to a state-run restaurant using the food stamps the villagers barely scraped together. You're too stupid to even understand simple words. Do you really think you can pass the university entrance exam? In a split second, Dorian's eyes went bloodshot, his anger boiling over as he glared at Bellatrix. Bitch. Everything I've done. It's all been for you. If it weren't for waiting for you, would we have missed the train? Furious, Dorian pinned Bellatrix to the ground and began beating her. Bellatrix fought back fiercely, pulling at Dorian's hair and biting him. The two of them rolled around on the ground. And I, along with the other sent down youths, couldn't help but laugh. Where did all that lovey-dovey charm go? Why are you suddenly fighting? Everyone watched with glee, yet no one intervened. After all, these two had already pushed the limits yesterday, and the whole village had been on the edge about them. In the end, the armed forces couldn't stand it anymore and stepped in to break them up. Dorian, still seething, spat on Bellatrix, who was bruised but still glared at him with defiance. Lon, go tell the militia that I'm your husband and I should be allowed to go to the provincial capital with you. Dorian wasn't giving up, still wanting to board the plane. I stood in the cabin, coldly meeting his gaze as I sneered. Why didn't you remember I was your wife when you beat me last night? Actually, I've been lying to you. From the beginning, I never intended to take you to the provincial capital. But I do have to thank you. You've provided me with a wonderful show of a dog-eat-dog drama. Dorian's face turned pale. You said you had friends in the provincial capital and that a plane would come for you. So where's the plane? Leora burst out laughing beside me. If there's no plane, then guess you'll have to walk to the provincial capital. By the way, having fulfilled my obsession, how was the meal last night? You wouldn't happen to be starving with no money or food stamps, would you? Dorian pounded the side of the plane in frustration but quickly sneered again. Lon, since you're so heartless, don't blame me for not showing mercy anymore. Dorian pulled out the introduction letter again, his face dark with malice as he glared at me. The introduction letter is in my hands. If I can't take the exam, neither will any of you. The sent-down youths froze for a moment, looking at me, unsure of what to do. Last night, when Dorian stole the food stamps and money, he had also taken the introduction letter. Should we just let him come on board? Leora, afraid I'll tear up the introduction letter? Don't forget, without it, you can't enter the exam hall. I shot him a cold glance. You don't need to remind me of the importance of the introduction letter, I said, and with a swift motion, I ripped it to shreds. Lon, what are you doing? The other sent-down youths were stunned by the sudden turn of events. The thing is, the village can issue introduction letters, and so can the military compound. We have a plane now. Why don't we go back to the village or to the compound? It won't make a difference. As I spoke, the youths finally understood. In the next second, they all jumped off the plane and began pummeling Dorian. Before, they had been wary of him because of the introduction letter, but now they had no such hesitation. Dorian screamed in pain as he was beaten, and it wasn't until the militia chief intervened to prevent a fatal situation that they were separated. Everyone climbed back onto the plane, and amidst laughter and excitement, we headed to the provincial capital. 2 hours later, we arrived at the provincial capital and used the introduction letters to check into a guest house to rest. But to our surprise, we ran into Dorian and Bellatrix once again. Not only had they made it to the provincial capital, but they were back to being as close as ever. Dorian, leaning on Bellatrix for support, walked up to me with a smug grin. Lon, you didn't expect this, did you? We were lucky. On the way here, we ran into a friend from the agricultural machinery station. After hearing we missed the train, he specifically drove us to the provincial capital. Bellatrix, too, was smiling triumphantly. You were just trying to cause trouble and drive a wedge between me and Dorian, weren't you? Jealous because he's always close to me? Dorian says after the exam, he'll divorce you and marry me. After that, we'll see who will want you as a second wife. I smiled nonchalantly. That's great. You two are indeed a perfect match. You should stay together forever and stop hurting others. Just as I was about to leave, Dorian stopped me once again. He whispered in my ear. This time, I won't let Bellatrix's tragedy repeat. She'll pass the exam and get a return city quota with me. I looked up at him in shock. Dorian had been reborn, too. But it only took a moment for me to laugh and walk away. So what if he had been reborn? Did he really think he could get into college again? Just like in the previous life? From the moment he found out Bellatrix had married the village chief's youngest son, he had been drinking himself into oblivion, ruining himself. I hadn't touched a book in years. Even if I were reborn, what difference would it make? As I was about to rest with the youth, Dorian came looking for me again. His face wore an uncommon look of embarrassment. Can you use your referral letter to get me a room? Also, heading till Philmand session. Can you lend me some grain coupons? Bellatrix and I haven't eaten yet. I couldn't help but laugh. When you two were feasting at the state-owned restaurant last night. You should have thought of this, right? We've run out of money and grain coupons. Dorian's face turned pale, but he still stubbornly added, Eloan, no matter what, I'm still your husband. Are you really going to watch me starve to death? I shook my head. If that day ever comes, I'll personally go to your grave and set off firecrackers. With that, I slammed the door shut, not bothering with him any further. Dorian rubbed his nose, his face filled with anger. Fine, if you're not going to lend me anything, just wait. I'll make loads of money in the future. When Bellatrix and I are living the high life, don't come begging me. I could hear him ranting from inside the room, and I found it a little ridiculous. Did Dorian really think he'd make big money just because he was reborn? In my past life, when it came to job placements after graduation, if I hadn't gone to talk to the teacher for hours, Dorian might have been the only dropout in our class. The next day, having Philmand session, when I went downstairs with the youth, I discovered that Dorian and Bellatrix were squeezed together on the small sofa on the first floor of the guest house. Seeing their awkward state, the youth couldn't help but burst out laughing. It could only be said that Dorian and Bellatrix had brought all of this upon themselves. Had they not caused so much trouble, we might have actually helped them. Don't get too smug. After the exams, there will be a time when you'll be begging me. In my past life, the youth in our group all passed the university entrance exam. However, the best ones were me, Dorian, and Leora. According to the trajectory of the past, Dorian could indeed talk big like this. But in the previous life, the reason Dorian did well was because I, along with him, had crammed for the exams. This time, however, he had messed around so much, and probably hadn't opened a book since being reborn. If he still manages to score well, then I might actually reconsider him. The youth ignored Dorian and headed straight for the exam hall. Dorian, embarrassed but not angry, walked hand in hand with Bellatrix. Their closeness made it seem like they were husband and wife. Such arrogance. They really have no fear, Leora suddenly remarked, her voice tinged with sarcasm. The crackdown on this kind of behavior hasn't stopped yet. I smiled but didn't say anything, focusing on the exam. 3 days later, we began packing up to return to the village. Dorian showed up again with Bellatrix, accompanied by a middle-aged, chubby man with a middle parting, whom Dorian claimed was a friend from the agricultural machinery station. Are you still getting a transport plane to go back? Or are you going to squeeze onto a train? Dorian had no intention of letting any opportunity to mock me go, but I couldn't help but focus on the middle-aged man. He looked strangely familiar. Chapter 7. Bellatrix. Are these your friends? Are you all going to ride in my truck back? When the middle-aged man spoke, I suddenly remembered who he was. I smiled and declined his offer, then gave a pointed look at Dorian. This journey might not be peaceful. Be careful not to run into highway robbers. I'm still waiting for you to come back and handle the divorce paperwork. Before Dorian could respond, the middle-aged man, Yuchi, laughed confidently. Don't worry about that. When it comes to me, Yuchi from the agricultural machinery station, my friends will always show some respect. Yuchi's boast wasn't without reason. The agricultural machinery station was indeed a hotshot department, and most villagers wouldn't dare to offend them. But what he didn't know was that I was telling Dorian to be cautious of him. Dorian, clueless as usual, followed Yuchi and Bellatrix onto a large truck. The youth and I, unable to get a return train, had to take a long-distance bus back together. Once the bus left the provincial capital, it joined the national highway. But not far down the road, we were blocked by a large truck. LON. Isn't that Dorian and Bellatrix? I was pretending to nap by the window when Leora suddenly shook me awake. The truck was parked in the middle of the highway, blocking both sides. The driver kept honking the horn, but the truck wouldn't budge. Leora and I curiously got off the bus to take a look and found Dorian and Yuchi in the middle of a fierce scuffle. Actually, to be precise, Dorian was being brutally overpowered by Yuchi. Yuchi was on top of Dorian, slapping him repeatedly. At the same time, he cursed angrily. You bastard. What business do you have sticking your nose into Bellatrix and my affair? I was being kind enough to offer you a ride. And you really thought you were important? Huh? Dorian, his eyes bloodshot from the beating, seemed ready to fight back but was no match for Yuchi. All he could do was lie on the ground and curse. Wait. I'll get you back for this. Bellatrix said you're just friends with her. So who gave you the right to lay your hands on her? It turned out that on the way back, Yuchi had started making improper advances on Bellatrix, trying to touch her leg. Dorian had stopped him twice, but to no effect. Finally, having fulfilled my desire, Dorian couldn't help but scold Yuchi. Yuchi, enraged, dragged Dorian out of the truck and pummeled him mercilessly. The whole situation was simple, but when I looked at Bellatrix, I noticed she was quite flustered. Forget it. It's their personal business. It's none of our concern. I had no intention of digging deeper into this. In fact, this was exactly what I had expected. In my previous life, after Dorian and I had gone to university and returned to the city, Bellatrix had secretly written him several letters. I didn't know why, but in the end, all those letters ended up in my hands. In them, having concealed my incession, Bellatrix had confided in Dorian, crying about how she wasn't used to life in the countryside and hoping Dorian could help her move back to the city. She also mentioned a chubby man from the agricultural machinery station who kept bothering her. The agricultural machinery station. The chubby man couldn't that be Yuchi? However, when I saw Yuchi and Bellatrix at the guesthouse door, their expressions didn't look like someone who was being harassed. Moreover, before graduation, I had visited the village and learned some secret things Dorian didn't know.